without further ado, the election is, for all intents and purposes, over, with one big caveat in Georgia, which, Francesca, I know you're eager to talk about, of course. But we had, I think you can describe it as a strange election. This is a race where Joe Biden appears on track to win over 300 electoral votes, including the state of Georgia. Democrats have made their long-awaited breakthrough there. And yet, in the aftermath of this election, Democrats, particularly down the ballot, where they did suffer some losses in the House and some unexpected reversals of fortune in the Senate, seem intent on recriminations and criticizing one another and pointing out explanations for why the party didn't do better. Again, even as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win this race. Dave, I mean, if you had told us 2 weeks ago that Joe Biden won Georgia and won over 300 electoral votes, we would have said that this election proceeded about as we had expected at the time, about as the polls had suggested it would at the time. But that's not where we're in. Help break that down for us.
Well, the order of events matters, right? The fact that Florida came in and sort of, was sort of a rain cloud on Democrats early in the evening. I don't even know if it was the evening or the next morning, or because it became election week, and also how they counted the ballots, right? Like the fact that Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin counted mail-in ballots that were Democratic ballots later made it seem like at one point Biden was down by 20 points in Pennsylvania. So just mentally, the perception of how we count ballots, because we all watch this on television and they're blasted on chyrons, it looked like a tough night for Democrats early on Tuesday into Wednesday morning. And then obviously everything comes in, and now it looks like, there's people already out there saying this wasn't a close election. 306 electoral votes is a big win. Flipping two historically red states, Arizona and Georgia, those are big accomplishments for Democrats. So I was joking to a friend the other day, imagine if we didn't even tabulate the results and just release the winner at the end. Like we didn't have these running counts on TV. That would totally change the perception of who is winning, who is losing. You would just get the results whenever they were finished. Here's 100%, 50-48. Here's the winner. How we decide to count these elections, sort of, this is a mechanical point, and a sort of a television media event point, I think goes a long way in how we perceive them.
And you're absolutely right, and it's actually a little bit of a reminder of the 2018 midterms, when I think it took some Democrats weeks to realize that it had been a blowout election on their behalf, because they saw returns in Florida really turn south, and Claire McCaskill and Joe Donnelly were getting hammered. And they eventually lost, but they actually lost by much smaller margins than we thought on election night. And the California returns, hadn't come in yet, and because of the way they vote, it takes weeks.
Right.
And then I can only try to imagine the drama that would build if we had reached, say, like Thursday or Friday, and the results hadn't been released yet from some of the states. But it has had a huge effect on perception. And Wollner, the truth is, because I really do see it both ways. Biden did win over 300 electoral votes. He did break through in places like Georgia, not just Georgia, but in Arizona too. It appears he's still on track to win there. But the margins there, you're talking about, if 100,000 votes in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona go differently, Donald Trump wins re-election. In some ways, this was still a very close race.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's really two ways of looking at it. If you're a Democrat, kind of the half or the glass half full or half empty, right? On the one hand, yeah, he is well on his way to gaining over 300 electoral votes. He could end up with 306, which is exactly what Donald Trump won with in 2016. With the difference being Biden obviously winning the popular vote and is going to easily surpass Hillary Clinton's popular vote margin. It'll be really interesting to see, especially as more ballots come in. We're not even thinking about states like California, New York, where there are a lot of people voted by mail. That's really going to bump up Biden's popular vote margin to make upwards of 5 million. So you look at those two numbers on their own, and you say, yeah, that's a great night for Democrats. But obviously, two huge caveats there. One, as you mentioned, that in all of these battleground states, the margins were a lot narrower, particularly in the upper Midwest. I think the Democrats had hoped. Right? I think Arizona, Georgia, there was always an expectation that those were going to be close. But coming into Election Day, Democrats, I think, more or less thought, Michigan and Wisconsin in particular were in the bag. They didn't have to worry about them. And they felt pretty good about Pennsylvania. But obviously the way that those margins are looking now, even as, again, we don't have the total final results just yet, but, they ended up kind of escaping there narrowly. And, again, it kind of just makes you think about, easily could have been a 2016 scenario where, we win the popular vote pretty easily, but you flip, a couple, tens of thousands of votes in these critical swing states, could be looking at things a little bit differently. But the second thing that I think has, Democrats really dismayed at this moment, even as Joe Biden is the president-elect, is the down ballot, right? Like they did not have the week at all that they expected down ballot, right? They were expecting to expand their House majority. That's going to be fairly diminished by the time this is all said and done. They thought that they were well on their way to taking back the Senate majority. And now, they're going to have to somehow come up with two wins in the runoffs in Georgia here in January just to get to 50-50. So I think, a lot of Democrats, what the polls had suggested coming into Tuesday was not only will Joe Biden win, but we're going to make huge gains up and down the ballot. And this is going to be a total repudiation of not only President Trump, but his entire Republican Party of the last 4 years. They didn't quite get, that complete of a victory. And so I think that's why you have kind of these mixed feelings, even at this point from Democrats.
Well, again, it's hard to know exactly which party or if either party should really be beating their chest, because Francesca, the Republicans down the ballot can feel good about the Senate and the House, assuming that they hold on in the two Georgia runoff seats. But at the same time, I mean, look, an incumbent president just lost for the first time since 1992. He did manage to lose traditional Republican states like Arizona and Georgia, it seems. I mean, this is still, even if the margins were tight, I mean, this seems like a stinging rebuke for the White House. But how is it being taken there by allies of the president? Of course, the president himself is not conceded yet. So I guess he wouldn't see it as a stinging rebuke just yet.
Well, allies of the president, Republicans, conservatives who have organizations, right, that are still going to exist, that still need to, to work with the incoming Biden team, right? Like they actually have a fairly good outlook on it. They thought, and I wrote about this last week, so I'm so glad you brought this up. They thought that they were going to get their butts whooped, for lack of a better term, in these state houses races. They thought that they were going to lose at least 6 state house races, and that didn't happen. They thought that they were going to lose House seats, and they gained House seats instead. The Senate hangs in the balance, that's true, but the narrative leading into that was that Republicans probably wouldn't keep the Senate either. So, yes, the presidency is a big problem for them, but at the same time, with all things being taken into account, they see this as the best possible scenario for them, given that Donald Trump was not expected to win in the first place. They had already resigned themselves to the fact that that wasn't likely to happen. So they got these 3 other things. They're saying, all right, that's a decent day.
Francesca, I mean, what is your sense of whether or not the president is going to concede in this race at some point? Or whether or not that's ultimately going to be even necessary moving forward?
So everything that I have heard from my sources who were close to the president, close to the White House, is that they actually don't expect any sort of a formal concession the way that we're envisioning it. We're really, once again, trying to apply a really traditional model to a very untraditional president here. That if anything, that he is likely to continue claiming, as he is now, that even if he gets to a point, right, where he suggests that he lost or says that he lost, it would be because he's claiming that it was stolen from him. It was taken from him. And I'm not endorsing that point of view in any way. I'm just saying that is how Trump world sees how he is likely to respond to this as we move forward.